I managed to take my images from this to this, and it's all because of a relatively simple and easy to execute technique. You can start using right away, no matter what camera or lens you have, to optimize the quality of your images. So in this video, I'll talk about that technique, why it's so powerful, and give you a few technical tips on how to start using it. Let me start with the story of how I stumbled upon this technique, because it's a funny story. Basically, I was shooting a Milky Way arch panorama. You know, the whole arch of the Milky Way, and these things take time to shoot. But about halfway in, I started seeing clouds in the sky, and the sky quickly filled with clouds anyway, so I wasn't able to finish the panorama. I quickly captured the foreground just to have it, and left the location. It was a good thing I left because it started raining after a while, almost got wet. But then I had two choices. Either delete all the raw files and forget about the night, or use whatever I had captured to practice on editing and stitching and everything, and I went with the second option. And after I edited the image, yeah, it's not one of my best images, not my best work. There are a lot of things wrong with the image, but after I edited it, I realized, wait, it's a lot better than my usual images with this field of view, which were 14mm basically at the time. So I will just put a 14mm lens on the camera, on the tracker, track the sky, and then just capture a foreground. That was my workflow, and I believe most people have a similar workflow. When you do 24mm with the same workflow, basically 40mm on the camera, capture the sky in the foreground, you get a narrower field of view. When you do 35, even narrower. When you do 50, we're starting to get, let's say, too narrow of a field of view now, and most people won't actually like the image. So yeah, we used to do 14 because I liked that field of view. But in this case, it was the same field of view, but with a 24. And this basically resulted in a better image overall, in my opinion. So I had to look into the technique, and I started experimenting with these panoramas, but for a 14mm or 16mm field of view. And fast forward a few years after, now I call them vertical panoramas, and it's my go-to technique for capturing images. Like I will show a bunch on screen now. You can see what I mean, these vertical panoramas. So let's talk a bit about why it's so powerful. First of all, this is basically the technical side of the image. Everything, every piece of aberration, every aberration basically, the stars, the noise, everything you don't want to see in the image becomes smaller. And this allows you to capture better quality images, more megapixels, less noise, less aberrations in your stars with the cheaper or the more affordable setup. So you can go get a tracker, get maybe some software to stitch the panoramas, and keep the old DSLR, the messed up lens with weird star shapes, but still capture nice images, nice panoramas. And depending on if I get some example images, because I just came back from a workshop in Tenerife and La Palma, and one of my clients had a Nikon D5500. I believe that's a very entry-level old camera, but I showed him how to capture this panorama. So yeah, the technical side is that you avoid a lot of the bad things going on with your camera, with your setup, by just making them smaller. Now there is an artistic side as well. Notice the Milky Way in this 14mm image, and notice the Milky Way in this image here, which is a panorama basically. Notice the difference in the detail in the Milky Way, and also in the way the Milky Way appears in the image. Basically, the focal lengths you use, the longer the focal length, the more detail you capture, the bigger the Milky Way looks. So I had a video about lenses and about the use of each lens a few weeks ago. I will put a card up here if you want to take a look. I talk more about this in more detail, but watch this video first and then go to the other one so you don't leave it in the middle and get confused. Basically, with the more zoomed lenses, 24, 28, 35, you get better detail in your Milky Way. Also, these lenses tend to have less things wrong with them. Basically, a 14mm will always give you weird stars on the corners. 24, not always. 35, again, not. And if you go to 50, 85, that's a different story. I have another video about these insanely detailed panoramas. I will put it up there as well. So take a look at that again after you finish this video if you're interested in that. But these lenses, the middle to telephoto focal lengths, give you even better quality usually for every lens. So with the 24, with the 20, you have to look into it and make sure it's a good lens for astro. With the other ones, you have to look into it to make sure it's not a good lens for astro, because of basically most of the lenses are okay. Anyway, got off topic. Back to the second reason it's so powerful is because you get this better field of view of the Milky Way, more detail. It gives you a lot of more potential to edit, to bring out stuff and make it look better overall, the photo. But when I was thinking about what to talk about in this video, I realized there is a third benefit as well. I warn you, you will listen to it and think, what is he talking about? It doesn't make sense. But trust me, it does. Basically, you can't find the composition exactly before you take the shot because it's a panorama. You have to take a different foreground and then patches of the sky and combine them. I will talk about how to capture the panorama in a bit, by the way, don't worry. But this doesn't let you see the whole composition on the back of your camera, basically on the back screen, before getting the files, going home, editing them and combining it. And I realized over time, this more difficult way of capturing the images, let's say, or more artistically demanding, actually helped me become better at finding compositions and nailing the composition, basically. So there are a few tricks you can do. You can capture a wider field and then crop in and everything. But at some point, you will be able to capture just a foreground, a patch of sky and then a patch of sky above it, or I will talk about this in a bit again. But you'll be able to capture that and use like 80-90% of what you have captured. Which, if you think about it, is a really nice skill to have, to be able to, without seeing the composition on the back of your camera, be able to imagine it, get it done, and get a nice image. This will really help you come up with compositions in the first place. So even if you do this technique for a while, and then you decide, no, I will go back to the ultra-wide angles for a reason, you will 100% be better at finding the compositions anyway. That's something I have just realized a few weeks ago, basically, that put a smile on my face, because I remember the whole journey of capturing these panoramas, and I'll put a few on screen over time. I actually improved the technique over time, and I had to find out how to do it on my own, because I think no one else talked about these panoramas. Maybe I think Alan Wallace did a video about capturing a vertical panorama once, a bit before he died, basically, but that was it. I have never seen someone talking about these vertical panoramas. So yeah, I figured out how to optimize these panoramas over time, the best software to use, how to capture them and everything. And now let's actually talk about what I figured out, what I realized in these, I think, 2.5 years I've been doing this technique. So yeah, let's compare an early panorama, a mid one, let's say last summer, and a few from this summer. Here they are. And you have to understand, it's not only the panoramas that got better, it's my editing and everything as well. So the panorama remains the same, but I figured out some tips and tricks here and there. So let's go over how to capture these panoramas. Basically, you capture a horizontal image of the night sky at just above the horizon, include a bit of the horizon as well, so it's easier for you to figure out where to put the foreground, and I also have the whole sky before that. Basically, just the sky that connects the foreground with the Milky Way and everything, depending on where you are in the world. Maybe you have to actually capture the core when it's just on the horizon, if you are in the UK, for example, or somewhere where the Milky Way core is very low. But yeah, capture the first panel, the first image of the Milky Way, then move up. And usually the way I move up, I keep the same horizontal position. I track, so the camera will tilt a bit after I capture the first image. I won't really go into camera settings and everything about in this video, because I assume you know how to do that. If you don't, I have a beginner guide that I created recently. It's like a 16-page PDF. It's free. I'll link it below. You just need to basically go to the link and you'll get that. But yeah, if you don't know what settings to use and everything, check that out. I assume you know how to capture the images, and it's just capturing the panorama that is the thing confusing you. So yeah, capture a shortish total exposure time. So let's say 10 minutes total for the first frame, or 15, 20, whatever. Depends on what's basically on the horizon. If there is a mountain and it will cover the Milky Way anyway, maybe it's not the best idea to wait until it's covered and then mess up the second panel. But yeah, finish with that. Move the camera only up, not left and right. Unless you are doing a 4-panel one, I'll talk about this in a bit. I'll just go there with a simple one now. Take a star from the top third of the image, of the frame basically, to the bottom third. So let's use the rule of thirds, for example. There is a star at halfway through at the top third. You just move it, let's say halfway to the bottom third of the rule of thirds. So that way, you know there is an overlap, or maybe a bit below that. You want to do 30 to 50% of an overlap depending on the field of view you want to capture. But yeah, you just move it up, make sure that star goes on the bottom third instead of the top third, and capture another same time. Basically, if you do it 10 minutes, another 10 minutes of total exposure. Doesn't matter if it's 30 seconds, 1 minute, or whatever. The individual exposure times of each image. Again, if you track, it's a lot better. If you don't track, maybe you can do it. You'll just have to adjust a bit for the rotation of the Earth. So you have to go up and right a bit. Maybe use a bulkhead for that if you're not tracking. But yeah, you capture that, then turn off the tracker. That's really important. Go down and capture the foreground. Then you finish with that. Important detail, capture flat frames, because otherwise you might have some trouble with stitching. Yes, you can use Lightroom's lens correction, but flat frames is a lot better. I assume you know how to capture ducks and everything. Again, beginner's guide, take a look there. But yeah, you have to capture flats, which is an extra calibration frame. To do that, put a white cloth, a t-shirt or whatever, on top of your lens, but make sure you don't shift the focus basically, because you want to use the same focus on the stars as before. You can do it back at home or whenever you want, just make sure it's focused on the stars again. Use the same ISO and the same aperture. Shutter speed, it will have to change, but let's talk about that in a bit. Basically, as you have the t-shirt, for example, on top of the camera lens, you add illumination there, a tablet, for example, or something with even illumination. Maybe your phone if it's big enough, maybe a tablet, a laptop screen, light panel, doesn't matter. And then the image will be overexposed. So now you want to switch your camera to aperture priority mode to fix the exposure basically for the whole series of flat frames. And don't capture just one, capture like 16, 32, 64, doesn't matter, and stack them. If you're using Segway or if you're using AstroPixel processor like me, or Deep Sky Stacker or whatever, the software will take care of that. Just capture the flat frames, and then basically you'll have the exposure with the same ISO, the same focus point, the same aperture, but in different shutter speed. It will probably be something 1/40, 1/250 of a second, something like that. If it's like 30 seconds, maybe you did something wrong here, or you're using too close to an aperture. I don't know, figure it out. But you take the flats, then open your software where you stack the images. If you are using Segway or Deep Sky Stacker or whatever, so basically software that doesn't stitch panoramas, you'll have to stitch the panorama after you stack everything in a different software. I will talk about that in a bit, but basically stack it as usual, both the panels, and then you can either use PT-GUI, which is really expensive, and if you don't have it already, maybe you don't want to buy it, that's okay. An alternative is the Microsoft ICE, I think it stands for Image Composite Editor, maybe, I'm not sure. Discontinued, but you can get it from different websites, not from Microsoft. It just doesn't get any updates, but people say it works fine. You can also stitch them in Photoshop, but I don't know how accurate that is. It might take a while for you to figure out how to make it work. But now let's talk about the Astro-specific software. So basically stitching the panoramas, and depending on the stars, they create a mask of the stars, and they align the stars on the two panels, which maybe Cyril does it, I'm not sure, but the two softwares I have that do is AstroPixel Processor, which stacks the images too, and it's my go-to stacking software, and PixInsight, which is a pain to do it, to be honest. You have to let the software know exactly where that area you captured is. And if you are not using something computerized that knows exactly where you're capturing, like with telescopes, the ASIR computers and stuff like that, if you are not using something similar, it will take like hours to figure out where the that patch of the sky is. Basically because you have to find something in the center and put it there, and then you'll get an error. At least that's my experience. For you, it might be different if you have fixed inside. But yeah, you can do it in there too if you don't want to buy any other software, if you don't have any other software and you just want to make pixel inside work. You can do it, it's just complicated. So you stitch the panorama, and then you basically just have to blend the foreground after you edit the sky. It's a normal image, like every tracked image of the night sky you capture. Or if you are not tracking, basically start tracking, but until you do that, just capture a simple foreground and then move up for the sky, and then again tilt it a bit, capture the next panel of the sky, figure out how to stitch them, and then blend with the foreground. In the beginner guide, I'm not 100% sure, but I think I show you how to blend with the foreground as well. I have a video there, so take a look at that guide if you don't know how to do that. And yeah, that's it. That's how you capture a simple panorama. Now, the next step after you nail this and you are able to capture nice images is maybe capture a 4-panel one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and make a wider image. You can do that also. I have done a 3x3 one as well with a 35mm. That's mostly for the winter night sky because I want a wider field of view to capture, Orion and all the region there inside. But yeah, that's how you capture a panorama. If you want to plan a panorama the right way and you don't know how to do that, I also have a video on how to plan your Nightscapes. Take a look, it's the card up here.